He smelled like leather and bourbon. The man who sat across from her in the flickering light of the motel room had a calmness that made her skin crawl. He looked at her like he'd already read the ending of her story, and somehow he still smiled. That night, she believed he was just another stranger trying to forget something. She didn't know he had already erased someone, her husband. Before we tell you how she found out, before we unravel the betrayal, the child, and the revenge, know this. She didn't set out to fall in love with the killer. But when the truth surfaced, she didn't break down. She sharpened her silence into a weapon. And by the end, he'd wish she never crossed her path. If you think you've heard every twisted love story, think again. This one starts with a funeral and ends with a scream. Subscribe now and don't blink. You'll want to watch till the very end. The day of Marcus Fletcher's funeral, the rain didn't just fall, it punished the town. Thick, pounding sheets slapped the windshield as Naomi sat in the front seat, gripping the steering wheel like it could anchor her to something real. Her husband's coffin hadn't even been lowered yet, and already whispers circled like flies. Wrong place, wrong time, they said. Random robbery. Just bad luck. But Naomi knew Marcus. He didn't walk into places blindly. He didn't get caught anywhere. He calculated everything, especially since that new deal he'd landed. A shady contractor with deep pockets and no past. Marcus had told her once, 2 weeks before he was shot behind the auto shop. This guy ain't clean. If I don't come home one day, know it's not random. Naomi hadn't wanted to hear that. She'd brushed it off, told him to stop being paranoid. But now he was dead, and nobody had answers. After the funeral, Naomi went back to the house. Their house. It felt too quiet, like the walls were afraid to speak. Marcus's boots were still by the door. His cologne still lingered on the towel rack, and his voice was gone. That night, she didn't sleep. The phone rang twice. No one spoke. A car idled outside the house for too long, and somewhere deep inside her, something cracked. 3 months later, Naomi moved to a smaller town in Georgia, near her cousin's place. She needed space. From the memories, from the grief, from the cops who stopped calling. She picked up a waitress job at a roadside bar, the kind of place where men came to drink, forget, and disappear. That's where she met Reed. He wasn't loud, wasn't drunk, just sat at the corner booth every Friday, ordered 2 fingers of bourbon, and tipped well. He had a small scar above his brow and a way of talking that made everything sound like a secret. He told Naomi he was in logistics. She didn't ask what kind. What drew her in was how different he felt from Marcus. He didn't plan everything. He didn't look at his phone during dinner. He didn't talk about danger. He made her forget, and forgetting felt like breathing again. One night after closing, Reed stayed behind. He helped her mop. They shared a drink. And then, quietly, he kissed her. Weeks passed. They became a thing. Not defined. Not public. Just easy. Until the night she found out she was pregnant. Naomi didn't panic. Strangely, she felt calm. Like maybe the universe was giving her a second chance. A family again. And Reed, he smiled when she told him. Held her hand. Promised he'd be there. But something about his smile that night, it didn't reach his eyes. Naomi's cousin, Lila, had always been the type to check into people. Nobody just shows up out of nowhere, girl, she'd said when Naomi first mentioned Reed. So Lila did what Lila always did, searched. And she found something. A picture. Grainy. From a court file in Alabama. A mugshot. Reed wasn't Reed. His real name was David Carson. And 5 years ago, he was arrested in connection to a string of armed robberies across 3 states. The case was dropped. No witnesses. No evidence. But in one of those robberies, Marcus Fletcher had been shot. Lila printed it all and showed Naomi. Naomi didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just said, "Get out of the house." And Lila did. That night, Naomi waited. Reed came over around midnight, as usual. He brought takeout. Told her she looked beautiful. She played along. She smiled. She even kissed him. She asked, "You ever lose someone you cared about?" He hesitated, then said, "Yeah, but they probably had it coming." That's when Naomi knew. This wasn't a coincidence. This was fate dragging his sins back into the light. Over the next few weeks, Naomi didn't confront him. She studied him. She learned his patterns, where he went after work, which burner phones he used. She followed him, pregnant belly and all, to a rusted trailer on the edge of a logging site. Watched him meet with two men in gloves. Watched him hand off envelopes. Cash. Guns. She wasn't just carrying a child now. She was carrying proof. One night, she snuck into his truck, found a glove box full of SIM cards, a burner phone labeled with coded names, and a photo. Marcus, standing in front of the auto shop, his back turned. The photo was circled in red. There it was. The hit had been planned. Naomi wanted to scream. Instead, she slipped the photo into her purse and put everything back exactly as it was. She went to the police the next morning. They didn't believe her. Said the case was cold. Said the evidence was circumstantial. Said Reed David wasn't even in the system anymore. That's when Naomi made her decision. She wrote everything down in a journal. Every meeting, every quote, every name. She mailed a copy to Lila, another to Marcus's old boss, and the third she kept hidden in the vent behind her bed. Then, she invited Reed over for dinner, told him she was ready to move in together, told him she trusted him. He brought champagne. She poured him a glass. Didn't drink herself. He asked, "You sure you're okay?" She smiled. "I've never been clearer." Later that night, she told him she had something to show him. Took him out back behind the house. Showed him the grave marker she'd made for Marcus. He stared at it. Long. Too long. Then, without turning, he said, "I didn't want it to go that way." Naomi stepped closer. "Then why did it?" He turned slowly. His face was different now. Cold. Calculated. "You asked too many questions." Naomi's hand didn't shake. The voice recorder in her pocket was already running. The next morning, Reed was gone, but not before she uploaded everything. The journal, the photo, the recording, to 5 different online drops, with auto-schedule, timed, labeled. "If I disappear, send this to every news outlet you can find." The police showed up a week later. Not for Reed, but for Naomi. They said she'd been making false accusations, slandering a man with no criminal record. Reed had friends in high places, and now she was under investigation. Pregnant, alone, marked. But Naomi was done hiding. She walked into the town hall that Friday during a public meeting with one thing in her hand, Marcus's phone, and the last message he'd ever sent her. "I think I found something. If I don't make it home, tell them it was Reed." She read it aloud, in front of everyone. Silence fell like a hammer, and then someone clapped. From the back row, a woman in a gray suit. She stood up, flashed a badge, federal agent, and that's when everything changed. Because Naomi wasn't the only one who'd been watching Reed. He'd been under federal surveillance for nearly 2 years, but they never had anyone close enough to bring him down. Until now. But Naomi had one condition. She wouldn't just testify. She wanted in. She wanted justice her way. And as the agents looked at her, pregnant, fierce, and burning with truth, they didn't say no. What she did next wasn't in the manual, because justice has rules. But revenge writes its own script. And when Naomi walked into that warehouse 2 months later, she wasn't just wearing a wire. She was wearing a wire and a gun. The warehouse sat like a sleeping beast on the edge of town, abandoned on paper, alive in shadow. There were no signs, no windows, just rusted metal and secrets. That night, Naomi stood in front of it, dressed in black, her coat hiding a government-issued wire and a borrowed pistol. She wasn't alone. 2 federal agents sat in a van a block away, monitoring the audio feed. Agent Torres, the woman who clapped during Naomi's town hall confession, gave her one instruction. "Just talk. Get him to admit it. We'll do the rest." But Naomi had another instruction, one she gave herself. "If the law fails me again, I won't." Inside, the lights buzzed low and dirty. Reed David stood in the center of the room with 2 of his men, flipping through a briefcase full of documents Naomi couldn't see. When he turned and saw her, His smile flickered like a dying bulb. "You actually came." Naomi's voice was steady. "I told you I was ready to move in." He studied her. "Funny, you never struck me as a woman who forgives easy." She stepped closer. "I'm not." The silence stretched like wire. She could hear her own heartbeat in the mic. She hoped the agents could too. "You know what I always liked about you," he said, circling her. "You look soft, but your eyes, they don't flinch. Not even now." She locked eyes with him. "You liked that about Marcus too, didn't you?" The briefcase snapped shut. Reed's smile vanished. "You should be careful," he said. "Digging up old bones, eventually, they drag you down with them." "I'm already down there," she replied. "I just needed to see your face one last time before I bury it." That was the cue. The agents moved, but they weren't fast enough. Reed reached for something in his coat. Naomi stepped back. Her fingers closed around the grip of the pistol. His men tensed, shouted, and then a shot rang out. But it wasn't from Naomi. It was from the rafters. A sniper. Federal. Agent Torres didn't trust the timeline either. Reed's weapon clattered to the floor. He didn't fall. He surrendered, hands raised, calm as ever. "I knew she'd bring you," he said, eyes fixed on Naomi. "But I still wanted to see how far you'd go." The agents stormed the building. Reed and his men were cuffed, hauled off. But Naomi didn't feel relieved. Not yet. She walked out into the cold night, her coat fluttering open, the bulge of her belly unmistakable now. And the moment the warehouse doors slammed shut behind her, she broke. Not in front of them. Later. Alone. Because even with Reed arrested, the truth still gnawed at her. He was the father of her unborn child. And no one, not even justice, could erase that. Weeks passed. Reed was held without bail, pending federal charges on weapons trafficking, conspiracy, and finally, the murder of Marcus Fletcher. But proving it wasn't easy. The voice recording Naomi captured helped. So did the burner phones and SIM cards she found. The journals. Her testimony. It was enough to build a case. Still, the trial dragged. Reed's lawyers played dirty. Painted Naomi as a scorned, grieving widow, emotionally unstable, obsessed, vindictive. And when the judge ruled a photo of Marcus with the red circle as circumstantial, Naomi nearly walked out of the courtroom. But Torres grabbed her arm. "Stay in the fight," she whispered. "Don't let him win the story." And so Naomi stayed. Every hearing, every cross-examination, every lie. And through it all, her belly grew. At night, she'd lay in bed and wonder what kind of child she was bringing into the world. Would they have Reed's eyes? Marcus's smile? Would they ask questions she couldn't answer? Would she ever be able to tell them the truth? Then, in the middle of the third week of trial, something changed. A man approached Torres during recess. Anonymous, nervous, mid-50s. He handed over a flash drive. No name, no explanation, just one sentence. "I used to work for him. I saw what he did." Inside the drive was footage. Grainy, night vision, time-stamped. The night Marcus was killed. It showed Reed walking into the back of the auto shop. He wasn't masked. He wasn't rushed. He waited. Marcus arrived 10 minutes later. They argued. And then, a gunshot. Clear. Unmistakable. The jury didn't need convincing after that. In closing arguments, the prosecutor turned to Naomi and said, "Some people chase justice, but this woman carried it." The courtroom fell silent. Reed was found guilty on all counts. He didn't blink, didn't flinch, just leaned toward Naomi as they cuffed him and whispered, "That baby, you think they'll ever really love you?" Naomi didn't respond, but she didn't look away either. Months later, the baby arrived. A girl. Naomi named her Hope, because after everything was taken, Marcus, her peace, her faith, this child was the one thing Reed could never poison. But peace wasn't what came next. One evening, Naomi received a letter. No return address, no postmark. Inside, a single photograph. Her and the baby, taken through the window. From outside the house. On the back, "This isn't over. D." Naomi went cold. Reed was in prison. Solitary. Monitored. But the reach of a man like that, it didn't end with a cell door. Naomi packed a bag. Took hope. Disappeared for 3 days. When she returned, she had a plan. She didn't go to the police. Didn't go to Torres. She went to a name she found scribbled in Marcus's old notebook. A man he once called the cleaner. Someone who handled the kind of messes that don't fit on court dockets. Naomi tracked him to a boatyard in Savannah. Told him everything. Showed him the photo. And then she asked one question. Can you find out who's still protecting him? The man lit a cigarette. Nodded once. And said, give me 3 days. On the third night, her burner rang. Block number. A voice distorted by static. I found the leak. It's inside the bureau. A name you won't want to believe. Then silence. The next morning, Agent Torres was gone. Desk cleared. Phone disconnected. No trace. Naomi stood by the window, holding hope. Rain tapped the glass like it had the day of Marcus's funeral. Everything had changed, and nothing was safe. She opened her journal and wrote, Justice gave me a name, but vengeance, that's where this story really begins. Then she opened the burner, dialed the cleaner, and said, tell me what I have to do. The man on the other end of the phone had no name, just a voice like gravel soaked in gasoline. You want the truth, he said. Then you'll need to go where the system doesn't follow you. Naomi stared at the burner phone in her hand. Hope slept in the bassinet beside her, oblivious to the war being waged just outside the frame of her small, innocent world. Naomi had already buried one man, testified against another, survived threats, gaslighting, and betrayal. But the enemy she faced now wore a badge, sat behind a desk, and knew how to disappear. The boatyard smelled like rust and salt. When Naomi arrived, the cleaner, known only as Cashin, was wiping down a shotgun like it was a prize violin. Name's been confirmed, he said, not looking at her. FBI Assistant Director Carson Grant, distant cousin to David. That's who buried half the charges before your husband's murder even hit the files. Naomi froze. That's why Torres vanished. Cashin nodded. Grant found out she was feeding you intel. Pulled her before she could testify. If she's not dead, she's hiding. Naomi's stomach turned. I thought David was the monster. Cashin's eyes lifted. He was just the weapon. Grant's the hand that held it. That night, Naomi opened Marcus's old laptop. The password still worked. Inside a locked folder, she found something she never noticed before. A video. Grainy. Unedited. Marcus, sitting in the garage, talking straight into the camera. If you're seeing this, I didn't walk away from this deal, he said, voice steady. Grant wanted me to clean a set of titles for his nephew. I looked into it. Found bodies. False identities. People who were listed as dead still cashing checks. He leaned forward, eyes dark. I was going to hand it all over. But if I disappear, Naomi, take this to someone who won't blink. The file had a timestamp. 2 weeks before Marcus died. He knew. He knew everything. And still, he faced him alone. Now it was Naomi's turn. The next day, Naomi met Cashin at a diner off I-16. She handed him the flash drive. Can you get this where it needs to go? Cashin sipped his coffee. I've got a journalist. Off-grid. Name's Jordan Sharp. They've been itching to blow open federal corruption. Do it, Naomi said. And Cashin, one more thing. I want to meet Grant, face to face. He looked at her for a long time, then nodded. Then we'll need bait. For nights later, Naomi sat in the back booth of a luxury hotel bar in D.C. dressed in black, hair slicked. No trace of the small-town waitress who once poured bourbon for a ghost. The plan was simple. She'd leak her location through an encrypted message. Cashin would intercept the surveillance. Grant, known for tying off loose ends himself, would come. Naomi would be the lure. At 11:13 p.m., a man in a navy suit entered. Broad shoulders, silver cufflinks, smile like a razor. Grant, he ordered a drink. Sat across from her. You look a lot like your husband. Naomi didn't flinch. You look exactly like the kind of man who gets other people to do his killing." He raised his glass. "Touché." She leaned forward. "You covered up murder, trafficking, God knows what else." "Why?" His smile faded. "Because power doesn't apologize. And men like me, we were never meant to be seen." Naomi's recorder, hidden in her clutch, was already rolling. But she wasn't ready for what came next. Grant sipped his drink. "You think David acted alone? You think he loved you by accident?" Naomi's jaw clenched. "He was sent, Naomi. After Marcus started sniffing around. We knew you'd move. We knew you'd be vulnerable. David made sure you were watched and disarmed." She felt ice in her veins. "So the child?" Grant nodded slowly. "Insurance." Naomi reached for her bag, pretending to pull out her phone. Instead, her fingers brushed the grip of the pistol beneath the table, just as Grant leaned in and whispered, "And now you're the loose end." Cashin burst through the bar doors a second later, gun drawn. Grant's guard swarmed. Naomi ducked. Screams filled the room. Glass shattered. Someone fired twice. When it was over, Grant was gone. Cashin had taken a bullet to the shoulder, and Naomi was on the floor, shaking, clutching her belly. She wasn't just in danger anymore. She was being hunted. They fled that night. Cashin drove them to a safe house 2 states away. Naomi didn't sleep, didn't eat, just watched Hope breathe. Watched her tiny hands curl and uncurl like they were reaching for something, or someone. The journalist Cashin mentioned, Jordan Sharp, finally made contact. They had seen the flash drive. "It's bigger than we thought," they said over a scrambled call. "We've got documents, bank transfers, sealed case files. Grant's fingerprints are all over every failed investigation tied to your husband's murder." "Then publish," Naomi said. Jordan paused. "We will, but you need to be gone before we do. Because once this hits, everybody tied to this goes dark or dead." Naomi packed that night. 1 suitcase, a blanket, Hope's formula. But before she left, she opened the journal again. Wrote one last entry. "They used my grief to silence me. They used my child to control me. But they forgot. I don't break. I burn." The story dropped 3 days later. Front page. Federal corruption ring exposed. The photos, the emails, the footage, Marcus's confession, David's arrest record, the warehouse exchange, everything. By noon, the FBI released a statement. By 3 p.m., 2 of Grant's associates were found dead in their homes. By 6 p.m., Grant was officially missing. Naomi didn't wait for the rest. She drove west, changed her name, cut her hair. But the scars, they stayed. So did the rage. Every time Hope cried in the middle of the night, Naomi would whisper a promise into the dark. "You will never be used. Never again." Then one morning, Naomi found a letter in her mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a photo of Agent Torres, alive, tied to a chair, eyes bruised, mouth gagged. On the back, "Come alone, or she dies." There was a map, a time, no signature. But Naomi didn't need one. She kissed Hope goodbye that night, left her in the care of someone she trusted. Then she grabbed her bag, checked her weapon, slipped the recorder into her jacket, and whispered, "Let's finish this." The sun hadn't risen yet, but the sky was already bleeding red. Naomi drove through the deserted hills, the wind howling against her windows like it wanted to turn her around. The map was burned into her mind, coordinates scribbled on the back of a photo that should never have existed. Torres was alive, and someone wanted Naomi to walk straight into the lion's mouth to get her back. She knew it was a trap, but Naomi didn't care anymore. She wasn't looking for safety. She was looking for closure. The meeting spot was a crumbling farmhouse in Tennessee. Middle of nowhere, no cell signal, no cameras. Naomi parked a quarter-mile out and walked the rest of the way on foot, pistol holstered beneath her jacket, recorder clipped to her bra strap. She moved slow, breath tight, no backup, no Cashin, just her, and a promise. The door creaked open on its own. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and dust. She called out once, "Torres." No answer. She stepped in farther, passing through a hallway lined with peeling wallpaper and decades of silence. Then, a voice. Naomi. She turned. There in the corner, slumped in a wooden chair, was Agent Torres, bloodied but breathing, gagged, bound at the wrists, eyes wide with warning. But before Naomi could reach her, a click. Metal. Behind her. Put your weapon on the floor. Slowly, she turned. Grant, still immaculate in a tailored black suit, still smug, still alive, and holding a silenced pistol aimed at her head. Naomi didn't flinch. She lowered her gun to the floor, eyes never leaving his. I figured you'd crawl out eventually, she said. Grant smirked. You leaked a story that cost me everything. Power, protection, legacy. That kind of insult doesn't end with a headline. It ends with a body. He walked slowly toward her, circling. You think I'm the villain, but I'm not the one who made a baby with a murderer. Naomi's jaw clenched. And you think you're untouchable, but I'm not the same woman who buried her husband. I buried the girl who needed permission to be dangerous. Grant cocked his head. And what does that make you now? She smiled coldly. Something you can't control. What happened next moved fast. Faster than breath. Faster than fear. Torres kicked the leg of the chair, flipping herself backward with a thud that distracted Grant for half a second, long enough for Naomi to lunge. She tackled him, sending both crashing into the wall. The gun skidded across the floor. Grant grabbed her by the throat. Naomi's vision blurred, but she clawed at his face, catching the corner of his eye. He roared in pain, and that's when Torres, still bound, kicked the gun toward Naomi. She rolled, grabbed it, and fired. Grant dropped, not dead, but down, bleeding from the shoulder. Naomi stood over him, shaking. He coughed, smiled with blood in his teeth. You won't make it out alive. Naomi stared at him. Then I'll make it loud. They left him alive. Torres insisted. We need him talking. Alive. He burns more people. Naomi nodded, but her finger itched on the trigger. By the time they got back to the safe house, Cashin was waiting, bandaged, pissed off, and fully armed. You all right? He asked Naomi. She glanced at Hope sleeping in the carrier. Still breathing, she said, but it's not over. No, Torres added. It's just beginning. The journalist Jordan Sharp published an update the next morning. Corruption tied to former FBI official runs deeper than expected. Whistleblower narrowly escapes ambush. The article included audio from Naomi's recorder, Grant's confession, the farmhouse, the plan to use Naomi's pregnancy as leverage. All of it. Suddenly, Naomi wasn't just a survivor. She was a symbol. Public opinion flipped. Protests erupted. Names were demanded. People who once praised Grant's career now called for his prosecution. And deep inside the federal building where his allies once protected him, his name became poison. But then, a second video leaked. This one wasn't from Naomi. It showed a man in a dim room, surrounded by redacted files, photos, names. A hidden camera captured his face. It was David Carson, Reed, from inside prison. He looked calm, controlled, and he said, if anything happens to Naomi Fletcher or that child, the rest of what I know gets released. You think Grant was bad? He was just the entry point. He leaned forward, the real rot still out there, watching. Naomi watched the clip in silence. Cashin leaned on the wall behind her. You believe him? Naomi nodded slowly. He's protecting me. Not because he cares, but because he's trying to buy power, even from a cage. Cashin sighed. Well, if that's the game, we play harder. A week passed. Naomi took Hope to a park, let her feel sunlight again. For the first time in months, things almost felt quiet, until she got the text. Your child isn't safe. Check the blue car across the street. Engine still warm. No number, no name, just dread. Naomi ran, pulled Hope into her arms, sprinted back to the safe house. Cashin checked the footage. Torres checked the drive. There was no one in the car now, but the plates traced back to a retired intelligence officer. Dead 5 years. Paper trail wiped. Whoever sent that car. They had reach. They had eyes. That night, Naomi wrote 3 letters. One to Hope, one to Torres, one to the press. She placed them in a lockbox, and she told Cashin, "If I disappear, release these. Burn everything else." Then she called David Carson, from a secured line, through a private server. He answered. Of course he did. "Well," he said, voice calm. "Didn't think I'd hear from you again." Naomi kept her voice flat. "I want to talk. In person." Silence. Then, "You're pregnant with my child. You think I'd say no?" She exhaled slowly. "This isn't about the baby." "I know," he said. "It's about what comes next." They met at a federal black site, under surveillance, under threat. Naomi sat across from him, behind bulletproof glass. David looked older, paler, but his eyes still the same. "You look tired," he said. "You look like a ghost." He smiled. "Ghosts haunt. That's what I'm about to do." Naomi slid a folder toward the glass. "Names. Files. People who protected Grant. I want yours." David raised an eyebrow. "You think this ends with me giving you the big boss?" Naomi nodded. "I think if you don't the person who sent that car after my daughter, they'll come for you next." David paused. Then he leaned forward. "There's someone worse than all of us. The one who financed Grant, who built the network. They call him the benefactor." Naomi blinked. "A code name." David nodded. "Real name's buried so deep. Not even I found it. But I got close. Real close." She stared at him. "Then let's dig him out." David reached under the table, pressed a button. A hatch opened in the wall. A hidden file. Naomi took it. As she opened the folder, David said one last thing. "When you see his face, you'll understand why Marcus had to die." Naomi flipped through the pages. Bank accounts, offshore transfers, photos from years ago. A man in a white suit, smiling. Her hand froze, because in one of the pictures, from Marcus's funeral, the same man stood in the background, umbrella in hand, watching. Naomi's throat tightened. The man was at her husband's funeral. He was watching them even then. The file ended with one line. "The benefactor funds both sides. Always." Naomi walked out of that black site a different woman. Not just angry, not just hunted. Now she had a name and a face. But what she didn't have was time. Back at the safe house, Cashin was gone. The door broken in, blood on the floor. And Hope's crib? Empty. The crib was empty. Naomi stood frozen at the doorway, the shattered lock dangling from one hinge. The safe house no longer safe. The air was thick with blood, Cashin's, and silence. She stepped inside slowly. The walls, once lined with security monitors and contingency plans, now hummed with static. A trail of crimson drops led toward the back exit, where the window had been smashed inward. Cashin had fought and lost. On the table was a phone. Not hers. Old. Prepaid. It lit up the second she touched it. A message appeared. "Your daughter is still alive. For now. Come alone. You know where." And beneath it a live photo. Hope. Tears down her cheeks. Wrapped in a blanket. A shadow behind her. Unrecognizable. But watching. Naomi stared at the screen like it was the last light in the world. They hadn't just taken her daughter. They had taken her purpose. And now she was going to take everything back. Naomi packed nothing. She wore black. No wires. No calls. No agents. Only one thing mattered now. Hope. She followed the signal. It led her to the docks, an abandoned shipping yard near the edge of the state line. A place where crimes disappear with the tide. A black SUV waited near a rusted container. Naomi walked toward it. Alone. Unarmed. Unshaken. From the shadows, a man stepped forward. He wore white. Smooth. Expensive. Clean. The benefactor. His face was older now, but Naomi recognized it. Not just from a photo. From the funeral. From the background of her life. He'd always been there. Watching. Orchestrating. Waiting. "You've made quite the mess," he said, voice calm. "But I suppose you get that from Marcus. Always thinking justice is something personal." Naomi's fists tightened. "Where's my daughter?" He gestured behind him. A woman emerged, holding Hope. The child whimpered, eyes red but unharmed. Naomi exhaled. "Barely. I didn't kill your husband," the benefactor said, "but I gave the order that led to it. Marcus was a liability. Brilliant but foolish. He thought truth could outplay power." He stepped closer. "You should have taken the settlement we offered after his death. You could have lived a quiet life, raised your child in peace." Naomi's eyes burned. "You tried to turn me into a widow, a pawn, and now a mother without a child." The benefactor tilted his head. "No, Naomi. I try to keep the world the way it works. Quiet, controlled, predictable." And that was the moment Naomi smiled, because he didn't know. Didn't know she sent a coded message to Jordan Sharp before leaving. Didn't know that every word he just said was being live-streamed to the world. Far across the docks, hidden in a crane with a signal amplifier, Torres watched the feed, streaming live, encrypted, untraceable. Thousands of viewers, then millions, all watching. Naomi's voice rang out. "You're right. Power does keep things quiet, but not anymore." The benefactor's eyes narrowed. He turned too late. Cashin stepped from behind the SUV, battered but standing, gun aimed. "You look surprised," Cashin said. "Maybe don't leave ex-spies half dead." The benefactor lunged, but Naomi was faster. She dove for Hope, snatched her into her arms. Gunfire rang out. Screams tore through the yard. When it was over, the benefactor was on the ground, shot, breathing, but surrounded. Sirens wailed in the distance. This time, they were coming for him. Back at the safe house, Naomi held Hope close, rocking her gently as dawn broke through the shattered window. Torres stood by the door, arms crossed. "We did it," she whispered. Naomi shook her head. "No, we survived it. Now comes the rebuild." In the days that followed, the live stream exploded across every news outlet in the country. The benefactor's face was everywhere. So were his crimes, his partners, his network. David Carson was offered a full deal to testify. He accepted. Grant was convicted of conspiracy, obstruction, and accessory to murder. And Naomi, she disappeared from the headlines. On purpose. 1 year later, a new name on her mailbox. A small home in the mountains. Hope's laughter echoing through the trees. No security cameras. No aliases. Just peace. Naomi planted a tree beside Marcus's grave that spring. A weeping willow. She whispered to the wind. "She's safe. And you were right. They blinked." This story isn't just about revenge. It's about resilience. About seeing past fear. About knowing that the system isn't broken. It was built that way. And sometimes, justice doesn't come in a courtroom. Sometimes it comes in the form of a mother who refused to be silenced. Naomi didn't start out a hero. She started as a woman grieving, betrayed, and pregnant with the child of her husband's killer. But when she realized the system wouldn't protect her, she became the system that would protect her child. Let this be your reminder. Never underestimate the quiet ones, the ones who don't shout, the ones who remember everything and act when it matters most. If Naomi's story moved you, if you felt her pain, her rage, and her rise, comment below. What would you have done in her shoes? Would you have walked away or walked through fire? Like this video if you believe truth deserves a voice. Share it if you know someone who needs strength today. And don't forget to subscribe for more shocking, raw, and real stories that hit where it hurts and heal where it matters. Until next time, stay sharp, stay awake, and never forget who's watching.